Ford S-Max of the first generation, 2006-2015 years of release. Good day. If you are wondering is it worth buying the first generation Ford S-Max and what problems you may encounter during operation, then you're at the right place. So peeling paint is not uncommon for the oldest S-Max. You will have to come to terms with this since the paintwork doesn't differ in great durability. Fortunately, the S-Max body itself is excellent at resisting corrosion, although it still has several weak points. On close inspection, small patches of rust can be found under the rubber seals and on the door edges. The exhaust system is also covered with a red bloom in a couple of years of operation in our conditions, but a similar problem is more or less typical for most modern cars. In terms of the quality of finishing materials, the S-Max minivan is not far from the budget Focus hatchback. Not surprisingly, over time the S-Max interior begins to squeak noticeably on bumps. There are also claims to the durability of the interior plastic. The elements painted with silver paint look elegant, but they are very easy to scratch. Ford drivers clearly didn't take into account that children will often ride in the S-Max and therefore the finishing materials could initially be more resistant to external influences. Electrical problems on a Ford S-Max are extremely rare. Of course, if you do not take into account those cars in which would-be electricians have already had time to dig. As for typical malfunctions in the electrical part, then periodic malfunctions in the operation of the air conditioner can be attributed to them. This is usually due to damaged wiring. Owners of S-Max also face a failure of the windshield heating system. Often the air conditioner compressor also causes problems. The performance of the latter is worth checking before buying a used S-Max. For the Ford S-Max, a dozen gasoline and diesel engines with a volume of 1.6 to 2.5 liters were available. As for diesel S-Max, they are quite rare on our market. However, almost all of its S-Max engines were shared with other Ford models, so it would not be difficult to assess the reliability of diesel units. All diesel engines performed very well in greenhouse European conditions. The only weak point was the turbine, the resource of which in rare cases exceeded 200,000 kilometers. When buying, this should be taken into account since diesel minivans in most cases have very solid average annual mileage. However, in our conditions, the purchase of a diesel S-Max is not justified rather due to the sensitivity of the TDCi series engines to fuel quality. Not high-quality diesel fuel itself will significantly reduce the service life of the injectors, the fuel pump and the EGR valve. All of these elements of the fuel system are not cheap, so fuel savings in most cases will be cancelled out. Another typical malfunction is the failure of the flywheel. The fact that it needs an early replacement will be prompted by the characteristic metallic ringing that occurs when the ignition is turned off. All other things being equal, there will be fewer problems with gasoline engines, although they are not deprived of weaknesses. By the 100,000 kilometers mark, many S-Max owners are forced to change the hydraulic engine mount. The intake manifold flap also requires attention. It's worth checking it out if during the operation of the power unit a slight metallic clatter begins to be heard. In case the S-Max didn't start up the first time and the idle speed now and then floats, it's worth preparing to replace the ignition coils. The power unit can also operate unstably due to a dirty throttle valve. The early years of Ford S-Max production were marked by oil leaks in the area of the threaded plugs of the channels in the cooling system, and all would be fine, but S-Max gasoline engines are afraid of even minimal oil starvation. If the oil level is not monitored, the timing chain tensioner will fail much earlier than expected. In general, the timing chain is capable of withstanding from 200 to 250,000 kilometers. An exception is the 160 horsepower 1.6 liter gasoline engine, in which the engineers used a belt drive of the gas distribution mechanism. The timing belt replacement interval is standard, every 80,000 kilometers. For the Ford S-Max, 4 types of transmission were available: a manual with 5 and 6 steps, a 6-speed automatic and a power shift robot. Automatic and manual transmissions are good and do not require frequent attention. By the way, Ford claims that both boxes are maintenance-free, but most mechanics strongly disagree. To make the boxes last as long as possible, it's worth making it a rule to change the oil in them every 80,000 kilometers. As for the clutch in the mechanics, it can last up to 150,000 kilometers. However, it's still not worth waiting for the complete wear of the clutch, since in this case the dual mass flywheel also begins to wear out. Perhaps only people who are completely far from the automotive world do not know about the power shift robotic box. By and large, the Ford drivers designed their analog of the Volkswagen DSG, failing to make the unit truly reliable. The limit for the robot power shift is 120-150,000 kilometers. Considering that most S-Max have come close to or crossed this threshold, buying a minivan with a robotic transmission is hardly advisable. Interestingly, for the most expensive versions of the S-Max, a suspension with adjustable damping shocks was available. There are very few such cars on sale, and it's definitely not worth looking for an S-Max with an IDVC system. Moreover, the conventional suspension combines excellent handling, good comfort and high reliability. For example, even the stabilizer struts in the S-Max suspension serve an average of 60 to 80,000 kilometers. The stabilizer bushings are capable of withstanding up to 100,000 kilometers. About 100-120,000 kilometers in the S-Max suspension are ball bearings, thrust bearings and shock absorbers. The service life of CV joints, silent blocks and wheel bearings is even higher, up to 150,000 kilometers. A serious revision of the rear suspension may be required for a range of 100,000 kilometers. The S-Max rear suspension is full of parts, so replacement costs can be surprisingly high. The power steering pump is a weak point in the steering of the Ford S-Max. Often due to the freezing of the pressure reducing valve, it breaks down much ahead of time. As for the steering rack, it will have to be replaced closer to the mileage of 180-200,000 kilometers. However, most owners prefer more affordable repairs to replacement. Fortunately, there are enough masters capable of performing such work. If you are the owner, then be sure to leave a comment about this car. Your review will definitely help others with the choice of a car.